Board of Supervisors, all of the constituents that are here tonight. Thank you for coming out to our town hall meeting for our power plants here in Charles City County. We are excited to have you here. We're going to, so tonight, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to talk about or to start a conversation about the power plants here in Charles City County. And one of the things that we've talked about and we've heard over the last several months is that there are great concerns concerning the power plants. And we have had numerous conversations with citizens. We have seen things on social media. We have a group that has formed, C5, the Concerned Citizens of Charles City County, that we're excited about. Because what we've learned is that when people come together for a common goal, it shows that you care. And I can tell you on behalf of the Board of Supervisors and I, we thank you for that. Because it's not that citizens didn't care before, but now it's more of an engagement. And we're excited about the opportunity to move Charles City County forward. And so after all the conversations and what we have seen transpired, we learned a lot. We learned that over the process of embarking upon this economic development opportunity, that we could have done things a lot different. This meeting that we're having tonight probably should have happened, we are 100% sure, before tonight. Yes. It should have happened before tonight. And that's the first part of change, is owning your part. I've seen citizens come up to the podium and say, you know, I didn't know anything about the power plant, and I haven't been to any meetings, and I didn't get involved, but I'm here now. You owned your part. And tonight, the Board of Supervisors and I, we're going to own our part and to say we could have done a better job. Would you agree? Yes. Okay. And as a part of moving forward, we know that we have 2 power plants, well, really 3 that have been approved to come to Charles City County. 2 natural gas power plants and 1 solar plant. Tonight's conversation is going to focus on the 2 natural gas power plants because that's the topic at hand. Throughout the course of the last couple of months and what we have seen and what we have concluded is that we all win if we work together. And before tonight, what we have concluded, we haven't been working together the way that we thought we were. And that's the first part. When you own your part and you know that you need to make some changes and you need to tweak some things, that's what we're here to do tonight. To start the conversation and to move this county forward together. So when we look at all the topics at hand, all of the permits, all of the regulatory agencies, we'll get into the panel, we know that we have to do one thing together, and that is agree to disagree. You have an opinion that we value, we have an opinion that we hope that you value, and we're not going to agree on every single thing. But the key to disagreeing is doing it respectfully. So we have to respect one another. Even in this point, in this conversation tonight, we can do everything. We can sing together, we can walk together, but we shouldn't talk together at the same time. And so respect is something that, you know, is earned, or we're requesting tonight that, you know, in this conversation, because we know it's a tense conversation, okay? We haven't seen this auditorium, this filled in a very long time. And what's unfortunate is that it takes a topic like this to bring everybody out. But that's okay, because we all win when we work together. And what this shows me is that you all want to work together with us. And so tonight, this meeting that should have happened probably before the project started, we know for sure, it's happening right now, and it's giving you all, the constituents, an opportunity to speak, to say what you have to say, because that's your opinion and you believe in it, and we respect it. And so tonight is the first step of moving Charles City forward. Because one thing that I've learned in the short time that I've been here, everybody likes to win. Nobody goes out on a field to lose. You go out to win. And so I believe that Charles City can win when we all work together. So as we're starting this conversation tonight, we have some rules of engagement. Because I do believe that we have to do everything in decency and in order, okay? So we're going to agree to disagree. We're going to respect one another and the opinion that is given, okay? We're not going to allow any outbursts, any disrespectful activity. If you do any outbursts, if you get irate, we will ask you to leave. Because that's being disrespectful, and we can't work together if we're not hearing one another. We are allowing only Charles City County residents to speak because this is our community, and we want our citizens, we want to hear from you. And so even though there are other constituents in the room that are not from Charles City County, if you have any questions, you can continue to forward them to the email address that's been provided. But tonight, during this live meeting, only Charles City County residents will be given the opportunity to speak. So in the back, we had a question sign-up sheet. So if you have questions tonight, we ask that you sign up, and we're going to gather that because we've had about 40 questions submitted, about 40 plus questions, and so we're going to run through those questions. When we don't want to stay too long, we want to hear what you have to say. And so anybody who has a question tonight, we're going to ask that you sign up, and then we'll call your name. Now, one of the things that we know for sure is that we cannot be in here all night long because then it becomes not as effective as it could be. Okay? So if you signed up, we're going to ask you to keep your questions to one question per person, and then once everybody is given the opportunity, then you're welcome to come back up. Is that fair?
Yeah.
We want everybody to voice their opinion tonight. And so we're going to try to keep this meeting to a minimum. We're going to try to work hard to keep it as close to 8:30 as possible. If we go beyond that, the chairman will decide that. But we know going into this that we want to focus on hearing things more effectively. Can we all agree to that? All right, so let's get started. Because one of the things, like I said, in winning, we all are working together. And so let's figure this out together. Let's move Charles City County forward together. Okay? And so tonight, in order to move the county forward, we're not experts in every area that we manage or we partake in, and so we yield to experts to assist us in projects. And so tonight, we have individuals from the Department of Environmental Quality. We have Tamara Thompson, Office of Air Permit and Programs Manager. We have James Kyle, Regional Air Permit Manager. We have Stanley Faggart, Air Guidance and Regulations Coordinator. We have Allison Sinclair, Regional Air Permit Writer. We have Joseph Grist. That's right? Grist. I knew it was going to be, sorry, Joseph. Water Withdrawal Permitting and Compliance Manager. Those are the individuals from DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. From the State Corporation Commission, we have Kenneth Schrad, Director Division of Information Resources. So from our power plants tonight, we have both of those power plants represented. We have Preston Lloyd, attorney with Williams Mullen, representing C4GT. And we have Jeff Freeman, representing Valico, the Director of Development. And so the question has come up, how did we get here? So when we talk about the process of getting to this point, there was a series of meetings, long nights, long conversations. But to start the journey off, and I won't go through the entire timetable, but I want to talk about C4GT was the first operator or first project to approach Charles City County back in 2013. And when they came to the county, their question was, is this something that you're interested in? And so at that time, we had a discussion with them, just a really lame discussion, just seeing our interest. And from that point, we actually sent them back to do some studies. They had to go through a series of feasibility studies. They had to go back and evaluate the land here in Charles City. And was this opportunity going to be feasible for the county? And so they came back to us after all of that was completed in 2015. And during that time, when they first approached the county, the Board of Supervisors was excited because at that moment we understood that this was going to be a natural gas plant, which was one of the cleanest gas plants that you can create. It wasn't nuclear like in Surrey. It wasn't coal as in other localities, but it was all natural gas. We had the natural gas line already in Charles City County, and so therefore the infrastructure was already here. The tax revenue that these projects or that project was going to yield really got us excited because at that time the Department of Development Director Matt Rowe was really hitting the streets hard trying to bring economic development to Charles City County. And so one of the things you have to remember is that, you know, we don't have individuals or industry knocking down our door, okay, to come to Charles City because we don't have the infrastructure. And so when we looked at the opportunity to bring advanced infrastructure to Charles City County, that was something else that excited us. And so we knew that long-term and short-term that this project was going to bring us a lot of jobs. And so in 2015, after their research, they came back and they realized that this was going to be a viable community to be a part of. And so we started the conversation. And so the county decided at that time to enter into an agreement with C4GT. We decided to incentivize them on 88 acres of land that we own. It was actually one of the last parcels that we own. And we decided to incentivize the project as other communities give incentives all the time via our Economic Development Authority. And so for the first 10 years, we decided to give them 25% tax revenue rebate, and then the next 10 years would be 10%. Again, was in industry trends. And so the company C4GT did request other incentives that we did not agree to. Okay, and we had the Economic Development Authority a part of the conversation, and therefore we entered into the agreement in 2015. In 2016, so when they came in, they thought they would be able to house this project in about 18 months. But they realized that it was going to take more than 18 months to get it done. And so they came back in 2016 and they decided, said, you know what, we need an extension on our option for another 3 years, and we granted that. So then in 2016, Balico approaches Charles City County. And at that time, it was the same pretty much project or the same concept as C4GT. It was a little larger than the C4GT project. But again, the county felt it was a great opportunity for Charles City County. And so when we looked at Balico. So when we looked at Balico, we knew that the land that they were seeking was already zoned, and so they just needed a special use permit. Now, one of the things that occurred in between 2015 and 2018 is that in 2017, county leadership changed. The Board of Supervisors made a decision to make me county administrator. And since that time, I've worked really, really hard, and I have a lot of more work to do to make sure that you guys are informed. And I heard a constituent say, you know, well, why didn't we get this information before, or why didn't we hear about this back then? And it was in just a general conversation, and one of the constituents says, because our county administrator changed. For those of you who don't know me, I'm from Charles City County. I'm born and raised here. I'm not someone that's here trying to get a stepping stone to advance my career. So if you don't know me, you have to know that I'm not here for a paycheck. I'm here because I'm passionate about moving Charles City County forward. And that makes me a little different than some of the other county administrators around the region. And so as of 2017, you've seen an increase in social media. You've seen an increase of information in the Chronicle. You've seen text messages or text alerts or phone calls allowing you to know information. But have I gotten it perfect? No. Am I finished? No. I'm just getting started. But it's very important to me that you know what's going on, because I believe an informed people is an empowered people. And this audience tonight shows me that you guys are empowered to move Charles City County forward. And so we continue on in 2018 with Balico. In 2019, both Balico and C4G have submitted their site plans. Balico site plan has been approved. C4GT site plan is under review. And we actually are moving things forward. So what we're going to do to continue the conversation is to actually keep you informed from this point forward. I can't talk all night about what happened and would have, should have, could have. I only can talk about where we are right now and how we're all going to win to work together by working together. And so in the future, you will have more communication about both projects as we're moving forward. So what we've done, we sent out the information on social media, and we've had an opportunity for you all to submit questions prior to tonight. And the reason that we did that was because we wanted to make sure we captured your questions. We know that we still want to give an opportunity tonight, but if we could have gotten, the questions beforehand, then we know that we would have an answer readily available to you tonight. So in that, we had some individuals to submit questions, and we got about 48 questions or 44 questions. But we still are going to give you an opportunity tonight. And so we're going to start with the questions that were established as of Friday. And what we did, we broke the questions up into 5 areas. The facility, okay? Go back, Lisa, please. Emissions, health, and the environment is a category. The economics behind the plants. Legal, and communication. So when we received those questions, we broke it up into those categories so that we can make it clear, or we can answer them with clarity. Okay? So, the first question that we got under facility is current standards that companies must uphold. When we look at both projects, the standards that we're going to uphold them to is according to the Department of Environmental Quality. Okay? And so we know that both of these plants are large investments for Charles City County, and so we want to hold them to the highest regard. And we're going to yield to the Department of Environmental Quality to help us with that. How will we manage these companies differently than we have managed the landfill? One of the things that you all know is that, or you may not know, with the landfill, we do have a third-party monitoring company that monitors the landfill for us. But again, we're going to yield to the experts to handle that for us. Why wasn't decommissioning required by the 2 natural gas plants as required by S-Power? Again, when we did the negotiating for that, and I'm sorry, Mr. Coder, Mr. Miles, or Mr. Smith, if you want to chime in at any time, please feel free. I think with the lights out, help you guys see it a little bit better?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why wasn't a decommissioning required to the 2 natural gas plants as required by S-Power? And so at the time of negotiation, that was not something, a topic that we discussed, okay? Because we know that the plants have some plans in place in their operations plan for decommissioning. So it was part of their operations plan that was presented. So can and should we require requirements now be imposed? That's something that I will yield to my attorney.
Change of the conditional use permit.
Yes.
The use permits that have been granted,
Okay.
to the extent that they've been granted, that's an accomplished fact. Unless they're willing.
I'm going to repeat it for you. I'm going to repeat it for you.
Are we?
Once they've been granted, they can't be changed because they're concurrent.
Okay, so and Brandy Ward is our county attorney, and one of the questions, the answer to that question is basically no. Because once we granted the conditional use permit, under those conditions that we originally agreed upon, then we can't go back and revise those permits. Correct. How will the gas plants be decommissioned and dismantled when they are out of operation? And so I will yield to Jeff Freeman for Balico, and then Preston Lord for C4GT.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Introduce me while I was the Director of Development for Balico. I have spent most of my career in power development, 30 some odd years with Concentrics Energy, which has a lot of operational experience on various facilities here in Virginia, as a matter of fact. But as far as decommissioning, it's one of the attributes of a facility like this that I think differentiates it from your more conventional solar facility is the fact that technologies that are being employed are easily malleable, if you will, and able to keep up with advances in technology as they are provided to the marketplace. Even though the facility that we're proposing, as is the one proposed by C4GT, they both represent different manufacturers, but are both the best available technologies that are available in the marketplace today. It's our responsibility over time to continually to operate and maintain those facilities in a fashion that keeps it on par and able to meet the regulatory constraints that we have to operate under. And if we continue to do that through our responsible management to protect the investment, and just as a point of reference, the facility that we're proposing has a total projected cost of somewhere between $1.3 and $1.4 billion. So it behooves us to make sure that plant continues to operate as long as it can. And if we do that in a fashion that we've historically proven, facilities like this really have no set expected life. They can continue to operate 50, 60, whatever, however many years, because of your ability to maintain the facility and continue to replace the technology and prime movers of those facilities. So typically, it's not an issue of decommissioning and tearing the facility down because it continues to have value to the marketplace in its ability to provide reliable and cost-effective energy.
Thank you, Jeff. Preston?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, and members of the board and members of Charles City County's citizenry. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm with Williams Mullen, which is a Richmond-based firm, and my role has been working with C4GT in connection with their partnership with the county, working through local permitting questions. And so when the principal of Novi Energy couldn't be here, which is the developer of the C4GT project, he asked if I could step in and hopefully answer some of the questions. So I'll do my best to offer as much information as I can, but if there are technical questions that come from the public that are outside of the scope of my familiarity, I'll be sure to get that information to Ms. Johnson so that we can make sure that that gets back to the group here. But to the question at hand, specifically as to why or whether decommissioning is a factor, it's a very similar answer to what you just heard. C4GT is looking to make nearly $1 billion investment as well in this property. That investment is one that will certainly be extended over many decades and will be updated as technology evolves and improves. So to completely scrap the project and move away from that level of investment simply isn't economically foreseeable sitting where we are today. So I think to second the question that was posed to the county attorney, the discussions that we've had with the board in connection with the special use permit is of course a public process, and working in good faith to figure out what are the considerations that the community has related to operation. Those are commitments that have been made that are legally binding and that C4GT expects to live up to and will be legally accountable to for the lifetime of the project.
Thank you, guys. So the next question was, how will county oversight of construction permits be provided? We will have a third party to do the inspections. Of course, many of you may have had experience with the local building official. Of course, this is out of the scope of work, and so we will acquire a third party to do the inspections, and that third party will then take that information back to our local building official for review and for approval. How many permanent employees will be employed by each plant? What will be the skill sets required for operation of the plants, and where will the personnel likely reside? Preston, we'll start with you, and then Jeff.
Thank you. So in terms of employment, at peak construction, which is the initial phase, we're projecting approximately 600 to 800 workers on site for a period of about 30 to 33 months. That's a rough estimate. The question that was asked was full-time employees, and we're projecting approximately 20 to 24 full-time employees once the project is complete and operational, which will involve management, operations, environmental, administration-related roles, and we expect to hold a job fair here locally to help fill many of those roles to the extent that we can find qualified candidates within the Charles City County community.
Thank you, Jeff.
Again, very similar. As far as permanent employment, once the plant is in operation, we're looking at employment level of about 40 individuals. As you would imagine, because of the technologies, these are typically fairly high-skilled positions, particularly at the management facility. We have historically sought employees from the local community. They have proven, again, historically to be the best employees because they have a vested interest. It's their community. They know about the community, what it takes to be successful. So we, as a C4GT firm, typically work with vocational education within the community to try to put in programs to train individuals, to support our whole approach of trying to hire as many of those individuals locally as we can.
Thank you, guys. So the next question is, what additional Charles City public safety staff, sheriff, EMS, and fire protection will be required for the likely large influx of transit personnel and increased traffic during construction, plant operations, and in the event of a catastrophic event at the plants? And so that is something that the county is evaluating with the sheriff's department as well as with the developers. As you heard, we're looking at about 800 per project for the peak period of construction, and that is something that we're working out a traffic plan with VDOT as well as individuals for our sheriff's department. Preston?
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, I just wanted to add, citizens may benefit from knowing that once the C4GT plant is fully operational, it will have its own EMS and fire protection located on site. So in that way, it won't be a burden on the existing emergency response personnel of the county.
Yeah. So when we met with C4GT, I think it was last week, we talked about that all of the staff persons that are on site will be trained and actually give our fire department an opportunity to train with them, and so will with Balico. And so Balico and our fire department have worked out their fire prevention plan, and so we're being proactive in having conversations with both projects right now. One of the great things, both projects will have an ability, if we do have a fire outside of the plants, that we will be able to access water to fill our tankers fairly quickly from both sites. And so we're excited about that because it presents another opportunity for us to put out fires for, our regular citizens. As we continue the conversation with facilities, what is the estimated cost of the county for these increased services and supporting infrastructure? And so as I stated before, they're actually self-contained, and so there's no additional requirement that we see at this time for our fire and EMS staff. As you know, we have a paid department that we're building, and so we will be adding 4 additional firefighters to our staff just for the community and not for these projects. So we don't foresee any increase for that at this time. How will road repairs that will likely be required from heavy construction, road traffic be funded? So as you know, Charles City County is not responsible for our roads, VDOT is. And so as with any other project, they have to submit a traffic plan, a road plan to VDOT. And so if there is any situation where roads have to be restored, that is something that VDOT will require them to do. So that's not something the county is responsible for, that is a VDOT responsibility. How many other power plants are being considered for Charles City County? The answer is 0. Okay? How many other solar companies that have approached the county interested in bringing solar to Charles City County? 3. So there are 3 additional solar plants that have approached Charles City County about bringing solar to Charles City outside of S-Power and outside of the projects that are here tonight. So when those individuals, they have approached the county, and that's it. They come in, they see if it's something we're interested in, they do their site inspections, their site work, and so we have not heard back from them. But in the event that we do, we'll have a conversation with those individuals at that time.
Ms. Johnson, may I interject just one thing? Is that past and present? The number 3, past and present?
Correct.
Okay.
Will there be any flammable materials stored on project site? For both projects, the answer is no. Continuing on with facility, what are the evacuation plans for the county if there's a plant explosion? As you all know, the projects have stated they have the latest technology that basically can shut down the plant in the event there isn't any explosion. But the county has an adopted hazard mitigation plan that our director of fire, along with our sheriff's department, it is a regional plan, so it's always already in place anyway. And so we would follow our hazard mitigation plan that's currently in place.
One other question. Sorry. That, we fall under the Surrey nuclear plant evacuation also, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's what I, okay.
Yeah. Will the electricity that is produced be used for Charles City residents? Jeff, I'll let you take that question.
This is actually a question that comes up quite often, and the answer is, kind of in a roundabout way, yes. The power that's produced at our facility is going to be interjected into the broader PJM system at the Chickahominy substation, which is immediately adjacent to our site. That substation is interconnected to Dominion Virginia Power, and power flows where power is needed. So that's where it becomes a roundabout answer to the question. There won't be a specific intertie to, say, a distribution line voltage that will feed your house, but it does provide benefit because of the cost of power that's being generated from the plant. Again, because of the technologies being as efficient as they are, it holds down the advancement of cost increases, if you will, within the broader PJM system. But if the power is needed locally, as it's interconnected to the Chickahominy substation, it will flow to where it's needed. And if that's within Charles City County, you'll get the benefit of that. Holistically, the fact that this is advancing technology and more cost effective, it does tend to bring down the rate of increases that people are typically subject to in the cost of electricity.
Thank you.
And for C4GT, it's precisely the same answer. It'll be going into the same network.
Okay. How many construction jobs for each project? Both of the developers have stated at peak season about 800. How long are the construction jobs for, Jeff, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, our facility is a little larger than C4GT, so we're projecting 1,000 construction workers actually. The construction duration is projected currently between 36 and 38 months. And the employment is a typical bell shape, if you will. It will ramp up to a peak of 1,000, and then as things start to wind down, the level of employment will similarly ramp down, but at its peak, we expect about 1,000 employees.
And for our part, it'll be approximately 500 to 800 construction employees over a period of give or take 33 months.
Okay. And we heard earlier how many jobs will the project provide after construction? We've taken care of that question. And so as we continue to move, we want to look at the emissions, health, and environment. And so information regarding each gas company and their experience in past facilities. We'll start with you, Preston, on any experience that C4GT has with power plants, and then you, Jeff.
And for the benefit of not going into too much depth, I'll reference the State Corporation Commission's application for a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, which is one of the permits that I think is going to be described in a little bit more detail this evening, but one that must be issued and has been issued in the case of the C4GT project in order to move forward. It requires a lot of detail on what the history is of the applicant and the kind of business that they've done. It requires a lot of explanatory information that I think the public may find helpful. It's a public document, it's in the public record. And so to briefly summarize a few things that may be helpful, C4GT, as I've mentioned, is the local entity that has been created by Novi Energy, which has over 100 years of collective experience among their management team of developing electric generation projects. Some of those include South Boston Energy, LLC, which was a 49.9 megawatt biomass fueled power generation facility, used wood chips and a greenfield development by Novi Energy. Fremont Community Digester LLC, which was a 3 megawatt waste energy biomass plant utilizing feedstock streams, and this became operational in 2012 and was managed by the same company. And so those are two examples that would give confidence that this is a company that has been in the industry for an extended period of time and has a strong track record in not only developing but managing and operating these facilities once they're up and running.
Catherine?
Yes.
I swear to you, Preston and I have never met each other before tonight. A lot of our responses are something very similar. But we do have a certificate of public convenience and necessity filed similar to them. It's on record with the State Corporation Commission. I would welcome anybody that wants to go, if you haven't already, do your due diligence and look at that. But I mentioned earlier the fact that I had spent most of my career with a company called Cogentrix Energy. Cogentrix is recognized within the industry as one of the leaders, if you will, within the independent power industry. We started in 1983, and at our peak, we have developed, owned, and operated around 8,000 megawatts of power generation. A lot of that was in Virginia. We had facilities in Portsmouth, Hopewell, across the river, and also one in Richmond at the DuPont Spruance facility. Most of those were cogen facilities. They were actually solid fuel coal-fired facilities. And if you think developing a natural gas plant can be difficult, try doing one using coal. We recognize that any kind of generation facility represents change to people. They're always suspicious when you come into a neighborhood trying to develop a project like this. But the experience that we have as a company and people that are now involved with me, frankly, in helping develop this facility for Balico, we've learned the hard way, frankly, over the years of doing this through the development of those projects. And you have my word, plus the regulatory oversight of the individuals to my right, that we know what it takes to make a successful project. And that's certainly a commitment that we offer to the Charles City community.
Thank you, Jeff. The next question is, has the county made a public policy decision to enable the Balico plant to avoid implementing its contract with New Kent County by withdrawing Potomac aquifer groundwater on the plant site? The answer to that question is no. Balico has entered into an agreement with New Kent County outside of Charles City County. We are in communications with New Kent, however, that once that water line comes over to Charles City, how can the county capitalize on the opportunity? For years, we've been talking to developers, and we had some great opportunity for businesses to come here, but one of the things that they said is that you have no infrastructure. Okay, you have no water, you don't have the capacity to serve our needs, and so they go to our neighboring jurisdiction. This will provide an opportunity to expand further economic growth throughout the 106 corridor. The next question is, Balico begins withdrawing a projected amount of groundwater equivalent to water used by 300 homes. What has the county put in place to monitor and identify homeowners if well aquifer water levels drop? And so we do not manage the well water levels. We will yield to Mr. Grice with DEQ, who manages the Grice, I'm sorry. Grice. When I see Grice, it looks like Christ. I'm sorry.
You go with it.
There we go. All right. Good evening. Again, just as stated before, I'm Joseph Grist. I'm the Water Withdrawal Permitting and Compliance Manager. I work within the Office of Water Supply at DEQ in their central office in Richmond. We're part of the Water Planning Division. It's definitely a pleasure to be here tonight to speak with the citizens about our program, and thank you to the Board of Supervisors for the invitation. Just so you understand what our office does, Office of Water Supply, we oversee groundwater and surface water withdrawals within the Commonwealth across the state. So for groundwater withdrawals, if you have a groundwater well east of Interstate 95, you are within one of our groundwater management areas, either the Eastern Virginia Groundwater Management Area, which runs basically from 95 to Chesapeake Bay, or the Eastern Shore Management Area, which is Northampton and Accomack County. Any groundwater withdrawal that exceeds 300,000 gallons per month requires a permit from our office. We also oversee surface water withdrawals under the Virginia Water Protection Permit Program. So if there is a surface water withdrawal component to a project, whether it's in the James or some creek or anywhere else, or you're creating a structure with cold water, our office is also involved with that and regulating that. We also have a compliance unit. Our compliance team receives the monthly reports or the semi-annual reports, depending on which permit it is, of the water use, sometimes water level and water quality if that's required, does the data entry, verifies it, does audits, does site inspections to make sure what we receive in office matches the records on site, and if we find a compliance violation, we do investigations, and then if serious enough, we'll refer it up to our Office of Enforcement. So it's a pretty broad spectrum of what we cover. In regards to the question on the table about withdrawing a projected amount equivalent to WAR 300, you're correct. This is actually covered through the permitting process. So through our technical evaluation of a groundwater withdrawal, we project out 50 years of that withdrawal. And we project out not an average, not the minimum. We project out the maximum use per day, 365 days a year for 50 years. We want to see what the maximum extent of the impact could be. And with that, we can project out an area of impact of the withdrawal. And that area of impact is defined as an area where the aquifer has been declined by 1 foot or more. In regard to the Balico Chickahominy Power LLC plant, that technical evaluation is defined area of impact of about 5,000 foot radius from the center of their wells. This does extend off their property. Because it extends off their property, they are required to have a mitigation plan in place. This mitigation plan is set up to protect those who have existing wells already before they've installed their wells, and it allows them to work with the company if something happens and they don't have water after the operation is started, and go through basically a mitigation process. This process is both short-term and long-term. Short-term is, let's make sure you have potable water to drink, and long-term is to work out what was the cause. Was it the company, or was it maybe someone well was 30 years old and just failed? So it's kind of, that mitigation plan is a requirement of our permits if this impact goes off property, which it would do in the projections for Chickahominy Power.
Thank you. You have something?
Could I add something to that?
Sure.
So I appreciate your comment. I was going to bring up the fact that there is a mitigation plan as a component of this. There are a couple of points I would offer up. I'm big on comparatives. One of the things that I hope people would stop and recognize is as a company, again, because of our background, we spend a lot of time looking at this plant and trying to minimize this environmental footprint. The approach we've taken as far as the cooling operation of the plant, when you're producing electricity, there's a lot of heat generated. Obviously, you're using natural gas as that motive fuel. You push it through this turbine generator, and then you capture that waste energy coming off the back to produce steam, which improves your overall efficiency of the plant. And you have to condense that steam back to water so you can reuse it in that closed system again. You can either use water for cooling, or you can use air for cooling. We purposely went down a path of air-cooled condensers, because if we did an approach of water cooling for the plant, the loss of evaporation to the atmosphere of water would demand a water use of about 4 billion gallons of water a year. That was untenable for us. We wanted to minimize that, so the approach we took again was air-cooled to bring that demand down. It still sounds like a big number when we talk about an annual use of 30 million gallons of water a day. That equates on a daily basis of about between 80 and 85,000 gallons of water a day. Now, this is where I ask that you recognize a bit of context. Our site is 186 acres. We're not using anywhere close to that. I think the actual footprint of the site itself is about 25 acres. But if I, just to pretend, if I came in as a residential developer, using 186 acres of property, you have to take a certain number of acres out of that for your infrastructure, your roads. So let's assume you take 30% of that out. And then you put in a third of an acre site to maximize your profit off of the use of that land. You could probably put 400 homes on that piece of property. The Virginia Department of Health average water consumption per household is 400 gallons per day. If you take those 400 homes, 400 gallons of water a day, residential use on that same piece of property will equate to about 160,000 gallons of water a day. That water has to come from somewhere. The water we're talking about for this facility is half of that. So please recognize that the environmental footprint as far as water consumption through this permit that we're in discussions with DEQ on now is relatively insignificant. It's an easy thing to scare folks when they hear 30 million gallons, but in the context of what it really represents, it's not that significant. The second point, the question was asking about, was the county purposely trying to do something to advocate our contract with Duquesne County? Frankly, it is just the opposite. What we're talking about is a special exception, I think is a terminology, special exception permit. It's being issued with a definitive time frame. We have 7 years. It's non-renewable. So what that means is it requires us, and the reason it's 7 years is because it gives us time to actually put a system in that connects to the Duquesne County water system, which itself comes from wells and surface water. We're in the process of modifying our own permits now. So that amount of water through that construction program enables us the flexibility of eventually tying in and servicing that contract we have with Duquesne County. So the program that's in place right now is not adverse to one another, it's actually supportive of each other. So that's the second part of the concept we're trying to keep in mind.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Grist. And ladies and gentlemen, I do want to apologize. I'm not winking or making eye or doing anything crazy. The air in the room and my contacts are not getting along tonight. So if I'm looking crazy for a moment, I do apologize. So what air and soil monitoring procedures will be put in place by the county to assess the effects on air and soil of the Charles City and neighboring counties and the state of the air pollution produced by the 2 gas plants? And so when we talk about air quality, we will yield to DEQ because they are the regulatory agencies for the air quality. So Allison, I will
Right.
direct.
I can speak loudly, but we'll go with that. The permits each require the plants to track, monitor emissions right out of the smokestack. And that is some of the limits that you see in the permit. I think this is more once it gets into the atmosphere. And DEQ does have an ambient air monitoring network throughout the state that measures the ambient air, and anything that goes into the air and mixes becomes part of that ambient air, and that's what's measured. And the Chickahominy permit also has some language in it for a monitor for PM 2.5, which is the fine particulate matter. And that will have to be located in a place that is approved by DEQ and others to get the best, EPA as well, to get the best indication of the ambient air when that piece is located there.
Allison, yeah, I was just going to add one thing. The existing monitoring network that you mentioned, there's part of that is at Shirley Plantation. We do have a full monitoring station there already.
And so all of the monitoring efforts are available on the DEQ site, because the next question is how will the monitoring data be publicly shared? And so it will be available on the Department of Environmental
Yeah,
Quality
air
site.
quality monitoring. Yes.
Ms. Johnson, sorry. At the Balico Air Board hearing, at the very end of that hearing, and Mr. Freeman, didn't Balico agree to actually putting on an off-site air monitoring? What
Yes,
didn't-
that's what Ms. Sinclair just.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was
Yeah,
clear.
For the fine particulate for PM 2.5, yes.
Okay,
It's in
thank you.
there.
Yeah, one of the concerns, to kind of expand a little bit, Mr. Coda, there was concerns about the prevailing wind direction in relation to the existing monitoring that's in place over at Shirley Plantation being a bit downstream. So the request came to try to put a more representative PM10 monitoring station, and we agreed to that. So we'll be working hand in hand with DEQ to specifically cite where that is, so it's more protected. And of course, there's other monitoring are to be in the public domain.
So Allison, if you also could address any health impacts for the power plants is the next question, and any estimates of likely healthcare costs due to the high pollution levels produced by the plant.
I'm not going to do the costs, I'm not in
Right.
a healthcare field, but I can address the modeling aspect, which is a complicated process. I have a hard time getting my head wrapped around it sometimes, but what we tend to do is the applicants submit what they have with controls and all, maximum emission rates. And at those maximum emission rates that they can't exceed, that we model the facilities. We determine if those emission levels are significant. And there's levels that are, that we use, that the air monitoring group will use to compare. If we find that they're significant, then we take it a next step and model a cumulative effect, which is another process again. And we compare those levels with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, which is something that EPA has developed over the years. The National Ambient Air Quality Standards have been developed with the, I guess, with people that have already existing health conditions in mind. It's not like, oh, it was just about a very healthy person. Basically, they are, at what levels would we consider it to be okay for someone with asthma, COPD, or an existing health condition to breathe? And we have to make sure, and the facilities have to make sure, that the modeling that they do shows no exceedance of those levels. And they're at short-term levels, long-term levels, and they all have to pass. And then there's also the permits that they have are prevention of significant deterioration, and by the sound of that, you've got very clean air here in Charles City County, and we want to prevent significant deterioration. How is that done? What we do is we do more sophisticated modeling, and we determine that there are increments. So you have clean air, and it's allowed that only a small increment is impacting, so that the plants can't exceed a small impact. And it was modeled, and it was found that even with the combined plants, it did not exceed. So what we would say is that after each case that we had determined through modeling that the plants do not cause or significantly contribute to a predicted violation of any of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards or the PSD. And again, that information can be found, it's a lot of data, but that's why we're here to answer questions.
I'm going to add a little bit to that. I'm Tamara Thompson, the Air Permit Manager in the central office. When we do the modeling is based on a worst-case scenario. In other words, we take the worst meteorological conditions, we take the worst, the very young. That is an EPA standards. They review this standard every 5 years. When we did the modeling for these facilities, we combined the two facilities. So we didn't just look at Vallejo by itself, we didn't look at C4GT by itself, we combined the permitting so that it was a cumulative model. If we had both plants running at the same time, worst conditions, worst weather conditions, what would the standard, where would we be in relationship to the standard? And we are, and in addition, add on what is being shown already at the monitor at Shirley Plantation. You add all that together, where would we be? And we were still way below, well, we were below the NAAQS standard. And we do this on both a short-term and a long-term standard. And we also modeled for some of the hazardous air pollutants as well to make sure those standards were also below what our significant ambient air concentrations that we have in the state of Virginia.
Thank you. And so, one of the questions, the last question on the previous slide stated, what is the county doing to be proactive for any increased health costs, healthcare costs? And so we're not doing anything to be proactive because, as you heard, we are yielding to DEQ, and with the worst case scenario and knowing that they're going to have stringent modeling, we are yielding to them to ensure that the air quality in Charles City County remains as it is. And so what type of emissions will the power plants produce?
Yes, I'm just going to find a place. You don't want to hear me mumble. Yeah. Okay. And that by type, I'm just going with the pollutants. And basically, the permits have limits on particulate matter, both the what we would say filterable and condensable particulate matter, fine mist, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, volatile organic compounds, sulfuric acid mist, and greenhouse gases, as well as some toxic pollutants, a little bit individually for each different plant. That's what's going to be emitted. So if that was what was meant by that.
Okay. And I think that you addressed the fact that will the plants produce any particular matter that would equate to fine dust, and the answer was yes.
Yes.
What are the plans to prevent harms to health and safety of residents in the event of catastrophic event of the plants? And so to prevent any catastrophic events, we know that both plants have stated earlier that they have hazard plans in place. We'll follow the hazard mitigation plan as the county has adopted, and also yield to DEQ as they are managing and regulating the plant on a daily basis. If harm occurs, how will those injured be indemnified? We have not thought to that point as of yet, because we're, again, have been reassured by DEQ that they're going to do everything to ensure that all of the conditions that have been provided to these projects are going to be followed. How does the construction and operation of the two gas plants comply with the governor's recent executive order to reach 100% carbon-free power by 2050? And 30% renewables by 2030.
The executive order was just issued, and we actually, so it's kind of new to us as well, so we're just currently working with the governor's office and seeing what direction we, moving forward, where we will be going. We are, as you know, we are doing a lot of renewables as well across the state. That's also a program that I work with. Currently this year, we've issued 15 permits for solar plants across the state, and we've got another 14 in the queue right now.
Okay. So, Mr. Code?
The slide said 30% renewable by 2030, is that correct?
2050.
No, that was 100%
Yeah.
by 2050. Flip it back one slide if you can. But I think it said 30% by, 30% by 2030. Where are we at today as far as renewables? If someone...
I do not know where we are right now. And I know it's not close, I know we're not at 30%, so there will be a lot of renewables probably coming online within the next few years. Like I said, we've got a lot in the queue at our agency, and we only do them from 10 megawatts up to 150 megawatt facilities. My colleague here at the SCC may have more knowledge of this issue than I do.
Well, it's been a goal for the Commonwealth. I'm Kevin Sherrod with the State Corporation Commission. Thanks for inviting the commission. Certainly, the executive order issued by the governor is a goal. The General Assembly has put into statute a Virginia energy plan or policy that has had a goal to create more generation in the Commonwealth of Virginia within Virginia's boundaries. Renewable has been a part of that. Legislation passed 2 years ago by the General Assembly encouraged our current incumbent utilities, Dominion Electric Power, or Dominion Virginia Energy, Appalachian Power Company, to add 5,000 megawatts of new renewable energy within the next 5 years. So already there's legislation in place to do that, and of course the governor's executive order sets forth the goal, and I think we'll continue to see more encouragement by the General Assembly, which sets the public policy for the Commonwealth, to encourage the development of renewable energy in the Commonwealth. If I had to hazard a guess, it's probably less than 3% currently of all electric generation in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But Dominion and Appalachian Power, both our two largest incumbent utilities, have lots of plans for adding new renewable, both wind and solar.
And so, Ken, while you have the mic, we can continue to move on to our economics, the impacts from the plant. The question is, what revenue will these companies bring in how? If you could talk a little bit about the assessment, the values, and then the anticipated revenue.
Well, I can't give you a number in terms of anticipated revenue. What I can tell you is how, once these facilities are up and operating, the commission, one of the commission's responsibility is to do the assessment of the value of these facilities. Just as a hypothetical number, the information filed with the commission was filed confidentially. So when these guys talked about what they're investing in these plants, I wasn't prepared to say that, but they kind of said that. But I can use a Dominion equivalent plant, for example, in terms of the same size and what its value was. But to make this math simple for you, if a company, if a power plant has a $1 billion value in terms of when it was constructed and put into operation, under current statute, about 90% of that is taxable. But then there is also an exemption for air pollution control equipment. So basically, if it's a $1 billion plant, you know, it's an assessed value of about $900 million. But you might assume that a $1 billion plant has probably about $200 million in air pollution control equipment on it, which is exempt. So that gets you down to probably about $700 million is actually directly taxable at the local level.
Write that check.
And so when we look at $700 million in taxable revenue, we understand that there will be a rebate that will go back through the Economic Development Authority. And so we are anticipating those revenues to be close to that with the combined plants together. Now, what other benefits other than the revenue will the companies bring? We know that they will bring jobs, but we are working with the companies. Both have said what else is needed here in Charles City outside of our projects. They plan to be great community partners, not just bring the power plants and that's it. And so they are looking to combine and do some efforts with the schools. That's our #1 priority for projects, as well as other community needs. Ken talked about the $1 billion mark. The next question says, what impact will the power plants have on school funding, LCI? And so for those of you who don't know, LCI is a local composite index, and it's the amount of money that the state provides our school system for funding. And so we received an email from Department of Education today, DOE, just estimated that if we had a $1 billion taxable revenue, what impact will that bring to the schools? And the information that we got from the Department of Education is it will reduce the schools by 1.5 million, okay? And so that 1.5 million has a 3-year lag. So hypothetically, if the revenue is generated in FY21, then the schools will not see a reduction until FY24. Okay, one of the things that the Board of Supervisors is committed to is making sure that the school does not lose that funding. When that funding is reduced, that we will keep them whole with any reductions that are provided by the state.
Ms. Johnson, can I touch just on revenue just for a second? I know I want to hurry up because we want people to ask questions. But
Yeah.
the Valco plant, if I'm not, I've sort of kept my finger on the pulse of the Valco plant. You've been pretty much doing the C4GT. And Mr. Freeman, correct me if I'm incorrect. If I see your head shaking, then I know I'm right. It was projected by you all in conversations with the SEC that your first year revenue to the county would be somewhere before rebate of about $7 million. Is that true? Okay. And projected with SEC over the course of the first 20 years, you would be looking at about $100 million. That's correct. Which equates out to about $5 million per year prior to rebate. Okay, thank you.
And one of the things that in our research we reached out to, we took a group of citizens to the Greenville plant, also the Brunswick plant. And so because Greenville is just come online, they couldn't really give me any data, but I did reach out to the administrator at Brunswick and just be interested in seeing their numbers. They have a 1,040 megawatt facility, and that yields them $5 million a year in tax revenue from Dominion Energy for the county of Brunswick, which allows them to increase school funding, police efforts, equipment, and infrastructure in Brunswick County. And so they have found it to be a great opportunity for their community. And so with our plants being that size, we're anticipating that similar dollar amount. Sure.
It's an important consideration, I think, from the county's perspective, and I certainly don't want to presuppose I can speak on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. But a project like this, whether it's our facility or C4GT's, represents industrial tax base. Industrial tax base to a county is particularly important because it's almost a direct additive to the tax revenues. There's very limited amount of drain off of those because I mentioned before, we're talking about a capital investment in excess of, did I say 1.4 billion? I meant 1.4 million for tax purposes. It's $1.4 billion worth of capital investment. That's a tremendous benefit to the tax rolls. There are only 40 employees. So as far as infrastructure burden from a facility like this, it's really relatively insignificant. There are not going to be a lot of kids that go into the school system. There's not going to be a lot of burden to the infrastructure itself. So counties typically like to have a good balance between industrial type development, commercial, and residential. If you go back to that residential development that I talked about before, the 400 homes on that same site, that would be a net loss to the county because of the effect it would have on the school children going in, demanding resources to support them, and the relative small amount of tax revenues attributable to the county. So from speaking on your behalf, perhaps inappropriately, this is really a significant boost to the tax revenues to every person in this room.
And so that we can be manageable of the time and make sure that we give ample time for questions, we're kind of just going to have a general conversation and not read the questions in its entirety. You know, when you look at the plans, both of them are in excess of $1 billion. And so we've heard from the SEC, you know, about $700 million. And so with that, we know that it's going to yield a significant amount to Charles City County. Of that, we know that the 25% for the first 10 years, and then for the and 10% for the second 10 years will go through the Economic Development Authority as a pass-through, so that we can give those and that incentive to the projects. And so I think, Mr. Cody, you said it best today. If you look at $7 million for both plants, give or take, what did we talk about today? Over a 10-year period?
20-year period, 100 million.
$100 million
Over
in
20-year
20
period.
years.
That's just one plant.
Correct. Next slide, Lisa. How rapidly are the new power plants? So the evaluations, Ken, you want to talk about that, the evaluation and the depreciation of the plant?
Yeah, for tax purposes, they have an expected life of 25 years. And under the scenario I gave before, for the first 5 years, the value is based on 90% of the total, okay? And then that declines over those 25 years and never falls below a floor of 10%. But keep in mind, as they stated earlier, these companies will continue to make new investments in these plants. So as they make those new investments, that the plant never stays the same as at its original cost. As they do improvements and add facilities or add infrastructure to the plant, that again changes the equation on the valuation. But typically, if nothing else, if they go online and they do nothing to those plants over the next 25 years, that's how they would depreciate for tax purposes.
And looking at that, we had to, I know the question is, you know, will property values for individual properties decline? And we've yielded to the Commissioner of Revenue, and we don't have any proven facts yet, but we do know we are estimating that we will not see a significant decline in property values for individuals. So when we looked at legal, what contractual agreements has the board made on behalf of these companies? The 2 service agreements that we have entered into are currently online. I know there's been a request, but we want to see the agreements. And so we'll walk you through at the end to the website where those agreements are made available. And can a petition to have referendum at this point go into place to stop the power plants? And the answer is no. When we look at communication for the power plants, you know, we had to look at how were the constituents, how were you guys notified, okay? There were opportunities that the county presented for, you know, the special use permit as well as the rezoning for C4, for C4GT. There were some rezoning public hearings both in 2015 and 2016. And so, again, historically, we advertised in the paper. We actually met all of the legal requirements for those advertisements, but what we have learned is that we could have done a better job by doing something like this, like what we're doing tonight. And so moving forward, we want to make sure that we keep you guys engaged and informed of projects as we move forward. When we talk about given the numerous public statements by Board of Supervisors members in support of the two gas plants, how can the board serve as an honest broker between the plant developers and the health and safety interests of our county residents? And I'll yield to Mr. Cota.
Well, actually, as you've heard here tonight from DEQ, and that's how we arrived at this way back in 2014 and coming forward, was the fact that is it safe? And we were assured, as you heard from DEQ tonight, we actually had a meeting here in the auditorium to where air modeling, and Mr. Stan Faggart, you were here because Allison, I think you had held up by the train. And we were assured, just as we said tonight, that the proper air modeling had been done on both plants, considering all the other industry and the Shirley plantation. So that's what we based our decision on, is the fact that DEQ is a government entity to protect you and everyone else. And their standards are set by the federal, I wrote it down here, federal. So that's how we arrived at our decisions to be the honest broker, to broker this deal between the county and these plants.
So ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy, if you could bring me the sign-up sheet. We want to yield to you all for questions this evening. We actually will meet you where you are with cordless mics so that we can continue the conversation moving. And so what we want to do is go through the list of questions so that we can make sure that we allow everyone that signed up an opportunity to speak. And if we get to your name and you said, oh, I don't have a question, it's already been addressed, you can just let us know. And so, and if I do pronounce your name wrong, I do apologize. But Rodney Guerin.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rodney Guerin. I live at 4751 Sturgeon Point Road here in Charles City. I've been a Charles City resident for 37 years. My question isn't specifically for this power plant, more than the root cause of why we are all here tonight. 37 years residents, that's a long time for some of us, others not so much. I am one man with one opinion and just wanted to touch base on a few things before we all get wrapped up in the business of this evening. First being that this is not Washington, D.C., that our board of supervisors are not getting rich from big company lobbyists and backroom deals. They did not drive here tonight from some other location. They are your neighbors. They live here and they work here. We, the citizens, elected these men by simple majority vote to oversee the growth, management, and sustainability of our county. There will never be even one decision this board makes that will be without opposition. I wouldn't expect anything less. This board and the several committees that it appoints are charged with the task of deciding what is best for our county as a whole. Social media has skewed the fact that they are transparent in every plan and idea taken into consideration. All we have to do is look with an open mind, go to the meetings, and hear firsthand what is going on instead of believing hearsay. And most importantly, see the big picture as they do. I have lived here a long time, watched years of mismanagement and decay plague our county. I watched our children graduate from a rundown high school in Roodville that we could not afford to fix. I've seen this county have to borrow money to make payroll. These men that sit before you have spent the last 8 years bringing this county back from certain disaster. And to them I say bravo. Who's with me? Thank you. Good job. Keep up the good work. Rarely are they told this because relatively small amounts of citizens that attend those county meetings are not there to praise the job that is being done here. Are these men perfect? No. No one in this room is. I reside in District 2 of this county. I know Bill Cody on a personal level. I'm proud to call him my good friend. But I could be the first one to tell you, I can only take him a few days at a time. But I can also tell you without any reservation that Bill, along with his colleagues, have a dedication and commitment to this county that is second to none. They have forged a great team and will do everything in their power to make this a better place for us all to live. We should all be thankful for what they do in our corner. I know I am. But again, I am one man with one opinion. And I thank you for your time.
I've lived here probably about 16 years now. You talked about emissions and you talked about everything that's going up. And I lived in Hopewell. When those plants go, I mean, some of you have been in Hopewell, some of those nice days, are we going to suffer all the smells from Hopewell? What about the noise?
Okay? One moment, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, we said we're going to do things in order. She used to live in Hopewell.
I've been here for 16 years.
She lives at 5641 Country Woods Drive.
I'd like to know about the noise. I'd like to know about all the wonderful smells that come with power plants.
Okay, so the question that she has, Jeff or Preston, you can address any noise or smells that will come from the power plant. So ladies and gentlemen, again, we need to be respectful of each other as we're talking, and so any outbursts will not be allowed. Jeff?
Yeah, there's a fundamental difference between power generation and probably what you experienced in Hopewell. Having been in Hopewell, we had a facility over there I mentioned earlier. Typically, smells come from a manufacturing process. There's some chemicals that are being used to manufacture some product, which is what leads to a smell. In power generation, there really isn't anything. It's not a manufacturing operation. You're burning natural gas very cleanly and very efficiently, and it doesn't in itself produce a fume. Now, natural gas typically has an odorant put into it when it's being transported, just so you can smell it if there's a leak. But when you burn this stuff, all of that's burned out, so there's no aroma that comes out of the stacks. Your second question on noise, it was referenced earlier, there was a special permit, a special use permit in place with the county for our facility, and I'm assuming for C4GTs as well, which limits the amount of noise at the fence line. I think it's 85 decibels. 85 decibels equates to like my sound of my voice right now is what it would equate to on a dBA basis. The whole purpose of that is to not have any adverse effect on sound quality to adjoining properties. And I can assure you that once this plant goes into operation, I don't know where physically you live in proximity to it, but I was speaking with Ms. Johnson earlier, and I think you said your house was a mile away from the proposed site.
Yeah.
She will not know this plant is in operation once it goes into operation. It's that effective in controlling sound.
Next, we have John Crams.
And my question is about the stranded assets. Since we're having the majority of the country trying to meet the 2050 goal of being carbon-free, that's in 30 years. 2050 sounds like a long ways away, but that's 30 years. What can you do to tell us that you're not going to leave a stranded asset? The two of you, the C4GT plant and the Chickahominy power plant. What are you going to do in 30 years if we are truly 100% carbon-free? The gas that's coming in, you're calling it natural gas, and I assume that's the name along the line, but it's fracked gas that's being piped in. It's not being fracked here, but it's in the lines. And what is going to happen in 30 years when you can no longer do that because we are carbon-free?
Preston?
I'll do my best not being an expert in the operations, but that economically the current assumptions are that this will be an asset that lives beyond 30 years from now. And so the investments that is being made wouldn't be made if those behind it thought that the lights would be turned off and it would be shut down in a shorter period of time. Again, we don't have a clear crystal ball as to what the future will hold, but those are the assumptions that the investors are making and moving forward with the project at this time.
Can I have a follow-up question?
He wants to answer
Okay.
your question as well. We're gonna limit, I'm sorry, Ms. Roberts, to one question and then, follow-up question to
I feel like that
this.
was an answer.
Okay.
Okay.
Jeff?
Just playing off a little bit of what Preston just said, again, it goes back, and I hate to keep using the big number, but the way these plant, and there was a question about how the plant was going to be financed. It will be financed through a combination of equity investments, people actually putting money into the facility, and a combination of bank debt. I can assure you, the diligence that goes into financing a plant like this will directly hit the point that Preston was trying to make. If this is being considered as a stranded asset, we will never be successful in securing financing for the plant. The reality of the goals that are being bandied around in the marketplace right now, trying to get to a pure carbon-free environment by 2050, I'm no better than anybody else with a crystal ball, but I can tell you what's going on in the marketplace currently is a lot of, for lack of anything better, smoke and mirrors. There are still emissions of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. What happens is there are taxes that are applied that enable an emitting source to continue to do that. They just have to pay for that. That's part of what's being driven by this carbon-free approach. I don't see anything in the immediate horizon or for the foreseeable future where you're going to be able to totally rely on renewable power. And I will be the first to say that renewable power has a place in the marketplace, but as far as replacing all of the other types of generation, I don't see that happening anytime soon. There's only a certain amount of daylight during the day, there's only a certain amount of wind. When those things don't apply, something's got to be there to provide power. And until battery development or some sort of storage operation is marketable, which currently it is not, you've got to have something to back it up. You hear a lot, you asked the question, let me finish. You hear a lot about people like the Googles and the Facebooks of the world claiming they've got 100% renewable power. I will assure you, the power they get is coming straight off the power grid, just like your power is. What they've done is purchased renewable energy credits from another operation. That operation could be in Nebraska. It could be a wind farm in Nebraska where this young man is from. And it's all a matter of semantics to give them the public relational benefit. But the reality is they need 100% reliable power. You can't get it from renewable power. There has to be something back behind it. So I say that only in the context of trying to keep things in perspective. Things are moving, it's a dynamic marketplace, but there will always be a place for this type of facility because of what it provides on a reliable and cost-effective basis.
I think Mr. Schrag, that you want to fill in?
Well, I just wanted to add one other thing. Stranded cost usually is something in terms of what's left for ratepayers in Virginia. I just want to make sure everybody understands these are merchant power plants. In other words, they're independent power plants. They're not being built by your electric company. So the total risk on these facilities is their investors, not Virginia ratepayers. Okay, so I mean, that's a key thing you need to understand in terms of who's at risk with these facilities, and it's their investors, not Virginia ratepayers.
And my question isn't about their risk. My question is about the possibility of a stranded asset here in Charles City County. Can you amend the agreement that you have with the county, that you will assure us that you're not going to have a stranded asset here in Charles City County?
Are you asking me?
Yes. You have the agreement.
Well, we touched on this before. It would be an easy thing for me to sit here and say yay or nay to something like that. Ultimately, it comes back to our investors. They're not going to put money into a facility like this for any sort of term if they think this plant is going to be stranded at any point in the subway district. So the practicality of doing something like that is completely unnecessary.
For Charles City County residents, it's necessary to know that they're not going to be stranded assets left here in 30 years, 50 years, 60 years, or 100 years. Most of these people have been here for 100
Ms.
years.
Roberts, with all due respect, we need to move on. We have several people that have signed up. Next, we'll have Ms. Cynthia.
Cynthia Robinson, and I also went to see the gas plant in Greenville, and we did hear noise there. So you're saying there's not going to be any noise, but we heard noise over there. So I'd like to know what's the difference between that plant and the plant that you, those two plants that you put in here?
Preston?
I think it's probably my turn to lead off. Whether you take my word for whether it's going to be noisy or not, your board has already raised that issue. In fact, they asked precisely that question when I was in this room appearing before C4GT requesting approval of a special use permit to authorize the use. And the question was asked, will there be noise problems? And the board thought prudent to include as a requirement, it's legally binding for the ongoing future, it doesn't have any sort of time limit associated with it. After the project becomes operational and for the period that it operates, it can only make noise up to a certain decibel limit. And if it exceeds that at the property line, there are legal recourses available to the county to enforce that and to require the operation to conform to those noise limits. So I would suggest that your board has already raised that question and made sure that there are commitments that this isn't a nuisance that will provide noise that creates problems for the surrounding area.
Next, we have Chastity.
Pollution and the risk, if you look at the explosions, fires, the storage of materials, the evacuation notices, the evacuation routes, and the other issues. What does Charles City have in place or will put in place to protect the residents? You keep talking about your protecting your assets. We're the assets in this county. What are you doing to protect us? Not your fiscal budget, your bottom line, but the fiscal well-being of the residents that live here. What are you going to do to protect us, our health and our safety?
Preston?
One of the benefits that C4GT has had success with in other communities that it's entered, recognizing that there needs to be a partnership with the community, is to look for opportunities to make investments in education, specifically job training. There's a lot of work that goes into building one of these facilities. It takes a long time to deploy close to $1 billion worth of construction, and that requires a lot of employment and well-trained employees. And so one concept, again, not knowing what the final analysis will look like, because we'll obviously need to engage with the county as part of a conversation, but is there some opportunity to look at a welder qualification program on the site that is also accessible to high school students in Charles City County that would help advance their specific job training skills? Looking for specific concrete ways that an investment like this can really help lift up a community and provide opportunities that weren't currently here. And to make sure that even if it's not for the construction of this project, there are well-trained individuals and residents here who are available to work on the next project that may come down the line.
Just to add, I apologize if I gave you the impression that I was only concerned about my bottom line, but that's not the case at all. That was not my intent, so I apologize. We mentioned earlier that we have already in place an emergency response plan that was developed by us and our EPC contractor, specifically for activity associated with the construction of the plant. That was put together in close coordination with Charles City County's emergency response team, fire, medic, EMCs, whatever the case may be, to closely coordinate the unlikely event that something happens at the site. We know in advance how it's going to be controlled, because it's in our best interest, as it is in yours, to make sure we operate like we say we're going to do. But if something happens, we know exactly in advance how we're going to respond to that in concert with the local community. It's to your benefit as well as to the benefit of our employees. One thing that was mentioned, I think, by Preston early on as far as fire protection, each of these plants has included in it a completely self-contained fire protection plan. It's ringed with a fire suppression system. Fire hydrants are out there. There's an independent storage tank that's put in place specifically, and the water is always reserved for fire protection in case it's needed. We have historically made available to the local community that increment of water in those tanks, on the unlikely case there's a fire in an adjoining property or a forest fire that you hear so much about in California, for their own fire trucks to come out there, tap into those tanks of water that we have available, so they don't have to continually shuttle back and forth. And it's proven to be a really positive benefit for the local community. So it's those types of things that are an evolving process for us. Each community is different, but we already have that in place for construction, and we build on that once we go into operation.
Next, we will have Matt Ferguson. I will ask, I do.
That's rude. I guess most of my questions have been answered, but one concern that I have, maybe if you can provide an answer, that'd be great. I agree that the DEQ should be the regulating authority, but as we've seen with the landfill here lately and the erosion problem, when things are overlooked, maybe it's beyond your control, what have you. There's 4 other projects coming to the county, and I'd like to know how that's going to be handled.
So the only other projects that we have are these 2 projects. We stated earlier that there were 3 that have approached the county, but nothing has been discussed further than that approach.
We have the solar farm.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
what I thought you, I'm sorry, I meant
Addition to the landfill, I'm sorry.
addition to the landfill, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you meant 4 new outside of this. Okay.
Sorry, President. I'll take the lead on this one. Your question is a great one. I'm going to characterize that as my who's garden and hen house kind of thing. You can have all the regulations in the world on the facility. If you've got a bad actor, those regulations mean nothing. To the extent it gives you some comfort, and again, I'm going to use the big number. Investors put money into these things. It's a lot of money. The only way we'll be able to provide the expected returns to those equity investors and the bank debt associated with it, and these are big numbers, is for that plant to operate. It would be sheer stupidity on our part to operate that plant in a manner to which it brings the operation into jeopardy by violating any of the permits, whether it's air, water, whatever. If we get shut down, we are dead. So, for what it's worth, you have my word, the plants are going to operate just like we say they are, following the rules and regulations as they're put in place, because nobody wins if we're stupid for the operation.
Preston?
It's well said.
Okay. Next, we have Odessa.
Lived in Charleston all my life. And we've had opportunities that we've never grasped into. My address is 10341 Roxbury Road. I think my house is probably 2 miles from where the plant's gonna be. I don't like it, but I have a real simple question here. The water is the issue for me. Built my house in '82, we had to dig an artesian well. About 5 years later, what's happening to my water? We're not that close to the road, but that would be an issue for me. And a significant decline in land value, yeah, that would be a significant issue for me because I don't have a whole lot, but what I have, I'd like to keep. And I know there's multiple questions there, but sorry, that's me.
Okay. Mr. Grice, would you like to address?
It's Chris.
Well, earlier I mentioned there's mitigation plans in place for anyone that's going to be within 5,000 feet radius of this facility and their wellheads. And that's when it's established, and those wells are only going to be in place for 7 years under the special exceptions they're working toward. At that point, they'll be on New Kent County water is the plan. If you're already having issues with your well now, you know, that's going to predate this plant, but also it's probably something you need to investigate. If you're, one of the things we're going to have to find out is which aquifer you're in. Are you just working off the superficial, which is the top layer, if you're working actually through the Potomac? You know, that's something we can follow up with you afterwards and talk to you about and see if we can figure that out, or at least get you to someone that can figure out what's going on with your well now if you're already having problems. They haven't built a well yet. They haven't established one. When they do, it'll also have to be built to BD8 standards, Virginia Department of Health standards. And at the end of 7 years, they'll have to abandon it per their standards as well, which is filling it with grout and shutting it down completely. But if you're having issues now, you know, that's something you either need to talk with a well driller, or we can see what we look at your location and at least maybe give you some guidance.
Mr. Lenny Miles.
Road, I'll be within about 5,000 feet of the proposed site, and my question is also about the water. Not only the water, not only the level, but the quality, and I'm going to address that to DEQ. Because I've done some reading on it, and I know in that Potomac aquifer, the water levels are receding. They've been receding for the last 10 years, 20 years, and I know my water has gone down 10 feet. I've been in where I live right now for 30 years, and the aquifer has gone down 10 feet. I had to pull the well out, I had to pull the pipe out, and you can see where the water was up on it from the calcification. So, you have anything?
The question is?
The question is, will the quality of the water be reduced?
Okay.
Or will the level of the water be, if you're there and you've got, say, 20 feet on your pipe, and y'all draw 300,000 gallons a day, is it going to be reduced down where it'll be below my strainer?
Not knowing exactly the location of your well to the center of their pumps and where you are in that 5,000 foot radius, I can't sit here today and tell you how much yours may or may not be affected. Okay. Now for water quality, in our technical evaluation, which is again, it's looking at a scenario all the way out 50 years, when everything would level out. In the technical evaluation, we look for a situation called saltwater intrusion. Whether or not it looks as if the aquifer would have an impact where the drawdown would invite a saltwater intrusion. What we've seen in the technical evaluation for this site is no. So there hasn't been a requirement for water quality monitoring on this site because we haven't seen any indication from the technical evaluation that there will be a water quality issue. I'd have to know your location in regards to the mitigation. And the one thing I'll share,
I'm east, probably dead east.
True. So what, you know, once the wells are in place is what we're going to, when we're going to see what the overall impact is. It could take 50 years before that 1 foot projected decline out 5,000 feet could actually happen. It's not something that's going to happen instantaneously. So part of this is to see if there is an impact. If there is an impact, the mitigation plan is in place to protect you. The actual area that's going to encompass, what we call the AOI, the area of impact, that layer for GIS, we will be able to share with the county, and they can also look there. So if you have an issue and you're identified in that circle, then we can work toward making sure the mitigation plan, you know, contacts happen. But, you know, I can't sit here today and say you absolutely are going to have an issue when they're well pumps if you're within that circle. I will also note that for mitigation plans, and these have been in place for decades, we don't see that many times that they actually have to be used. It's not a regular occurrence. So we project out on our modeling an extremely conservative manner to make sure there is a protection in place. But do we see it utilized that often? Not very often. But we will be in touch with the county. You will have the layer, and if you're within that circle, you know, and you have a problem once that well starts at Balico, you know, we're gonna get you in touch with the two. They've got a mitigation plan in place. They have requirements within that mitigation plan to react fairly quickly to make sure you have potable water, and we'll go from there. That's put it in to protect all citizens within there regardless.
Can I interject something from our facility and all the existing wells over 50 years? That's a gauge to see what the drawdown could be. It's an important thing to remember. The permit we're talking about, though, has a limited duration. We have to come off of those wells within 7. So to do a projection out 50 years is more analytic than it is reality. That to me is an important consideration that sometimes can get lost. This is a limited duration permit. We ultimately are going to come off of those wells and tie into the new component.
Because I looked up on, I Googled it up, and actually, you guys are limiting the number of industry that requires over 300 gallons a day, 300,000 gallons a day.
So, Mr. Miles, we'll get them back in touch with you in order to keep the conversation moving. Next, we have Ms. Lillian Crump.
I don't need a microphone, I don't think. I got a pretty loud voice. I guess I asked Mr. Kyle, in your professional assessment, if both these plants are operating day in and day out here in Charles City, is there going to be any apparent difference in health standards or the way of life for Charles City residents?
As Ms. Sinclair stated, our permits are written with the, assuming the worst case operating scenario, so that the permits have the limits on them that have, that would be at their worst case operating scenario. So, and as Tamara said, the modeling is conducted with the, assuming the worst case meteorology and with the worst case ambient monitoring data. And so we've assumed all of that when we issue those permits. And the permits are protective of the National and Air Quality Standards. So we do not feel like health issues will be an issue when these are both operating.
Thank you. And I'll end just with a quick comment. I mean, but not from my research. I mean, when these ultra-modern plants come online, my understanding is a lot of times forces older, less efficient plants off the line so that we end up with a better overall air quality. You know, it was great that Richmond this year had 0 ozone days. I think that's the first time in a long time. And so I do support the power plants. The county needs the revenue. The industry's driving a lot of this, the Amazons, the Facebooks, they're not coming to Charles City. We don't have an interstate exchange. You know, industry is not knocking down our door. So the energy sector is probably our best pursuit. And I'll end with saying I support this board and what they've done over the past 8 years, and I hope next week y'all will return them to finish what they've started. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. David Adams, and if you could.
Well, my name is Tara Johnson, 9100 Lockheed Road, Providence, West Virginia, 23110. I have like 16 questions. I almost wrote mine in a paragraph like that first speaker did. But how is the water being disposed of? We talked about how we're getting the water, but how's the water being disposed of from these wells? And everybody that's on the board, are y'all willing to come live with the residents here with your 2 gas power plants? Will there be any scholarship offers that y'all are the company?
I'm sorry to cut you off. We stated earlier to one question, and once everybody on the signed up, you can come back around. So
Okay, thank you. I answered the first question. What is the disposal of the water for the gas power plants?
So the outflow discharge will be into the river. We won't be putting it into the aquifer or using
any sort of treatment.
So there's a treatment facility that will be located close to the James River where it'll be put back in, and we have appropriate permitting that would conform to state regulations.
Where?
Unfortunately, I'm not the operational expert, so I don't have the precise address of the
Sir,
operation.
you're pulling all your water from the James at Berkeley Plantation.
Yes, sir.
And then you're going to return it to, I'm sorry, Shirley. And then you're returning it back to the James River once you're finished with it.
That's correct.
Right. Unlike the Balico, they will be withdrawing water. You are taking it and turning it back in.
Correct.
Right.
So do you have the company yet?
We'll let know.
Yeah, ours is a little different. We have a much smaller amount of water that we need than we talked about before. The discharge, the facility, it's not going to be exactly a zero discharge facility, but to a significant extent it will be. But what little discharge we do have, recognizing that any water we take into this facility has to be ultra clean. You have to strip. I'm just like you, I'm getting old. Even if we were to buy water from New Kent County that's been treated, we would have to strip all the treatment out of that to make it pure H2O so it doesn't foul up with the equipment. So the discharge that we have, a little bit we have, is going to be going back to the Wattsbury Industrial Treatment Plant right across the street.
611 Hunterwood Drive, and I've been in the county 30 years. I'm retired, and I work construction in Pleasant Point. Also, I worked over in Chesterfield plant. I've heard a lot here tonight, and I've seen a lot when I was working. And I won't go into that, what I've seen. But I got the questions I had. As well, it was so late that y'all started in 13 to really get out and inform the people of Charles City County. I know it's got to be negotiation, and I have very much respect for my board supervisor. If they took everything I said do, we probably wouldn't be standing in a building here tonight, probably not the county. But they have led the county, I think, very well for the results of what they have had to work with and what the county came up here with. But what I like to find out, as a citizen of this county, why it was so late for the word to get around to the average person here in the Charles City County area. And why so many things being changed while y'all supposed to have been in negotiation, and after y'all have settled on what you want, you're going to put the plan in, we know that. But that, any of us at all, I'm opposed to the plan. That's just me personally, I have that right. But what I'm interested in is when we had a little meeting at the Berea Church for the citizens of this county. There's very few of us here. I'm going to give, I'll take the death to this place here. Last time I was here, we was hanging with dog water.
Mr. Clark, we would like for you to ask your one question, sir.
One question. Why weren't we informed about the changes that were being made after y'all said you had an agreement? That's the one thing. And the changes I mean of this were so that we'll run water from the James River to the plant. Then the next thing we heard on the same question.
I got you, I'm following it. You're sticking to it, I respect that.
On the same question, we get, the next thing we hear you're gonna be drawing water out of the after first. The question is, why is all these changes being made and we not being informed like we were at Samaria, around throughout the rest of the county? Why weren't we informed of the changes? Because it's affecting us every day of our life, and our children every day of our life. Why is it that there's not more communication between the county personnel and the people that are coming into our county? Now, I'm just a full country boy. I don't have the education a lot of men have here, and a lot of women have here, which I'm very well know of. Only thing I want to know is why we're not being informed, why are things being changed? The decimal system was brought up. I brought it up.
You did, you said
I
in my
brought the
office,
decimal
and here
system
we
up.
are.
Y'all put it in the paper. Y'all put it in the paper and changed it after it had already been set. Y'all
So,
had made
Mr.
other
Clark,
changes
we're gonna address your
from the
question.
well. We're going from the James River to the well. And I just heard we're just putting down to the point where we're gonna take and have the water going to be transferred back down to James River. Why are we? Me, y'all are not together.
Mr. Clark.
Have you had any meetings at all with the rest of these people here? Because the reason I'm asking, you brought up a lot of questions, but we had to wait and got to be specific to one question. That's right.
So let's get back to your first question, just to make sure.
Let's go back to the first.
You only get one question, but then after everybody finishes, you can come back around.
Right.
We want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity. So your first question is, Mr. Coda's going to answer your question.
Right.
Okay.
Is the C4GT plant that is on the other side of 106 from Chambers Road. That plant is, from day one, has been negotiating and is going to draw water off the James River through their plant, return it back to the James River.
Where?
Okay.
Where?
Hold on just a second. I said that earlier. At Shirley Plantation is where they will draw it from. Right? Shirley, yeah.
And where do they
I always
put it
get Shirley and
back?
Berkeley mixed up. Now, the other plant, which is this gentleman over here, they are the one that's going to withdraw water out of the aquifer and for no longer than a period of 7 years, and then they're going to be getting it from New Kent. So it's two different plants. Actually, nothing has changed in the process from the time that they started doing this on both plants. And as far as your second question, I am going to address that in my closing statements, okay?
I think his first question was why didn't we communicate?
I'm sorry, I was on the changes. I'm going to address that also, okay, in my closing statements. I actually brought a sign with me to address it, okay? So I'm going to address it when I get to the closing statement on why you were not notified of it, okay?
Quite a lot of localities around the state. And as they're doing their financial analysis, Ronnie, you probably need to cut that off while you're holding it. So as they're doing their financial analysis and giving us that true number as we're getting closer, we will, of course, always make sure, number one, that our schools are made whole. Okay, we know that we have some infrastructure needs in the county. We know that public safety is a priority. But here's the part that we want to talk about as we're moving forward, that as we receive an influx of revenue, that we want to communicate and have meetings where you all can communicate to us what you would like to see happen with the funds. Okay, we do not anticipate getting X number of dollars and then making all of the decisions. As we said before, we all win if we work together. And so as we're moving forward, we want to have a series of meetings that the community can chime in and say what their vision is through the comp plan process, as well as other initiatives that they would like to see happen in the county. So it won't be the county administrator and the board of supervisors, we get, let's just say, X number of dollars, and then we make all the decisions. We want to make sure that we do our due diligence in community engagement. Next we have
on Watermelon Hills Road. I've got a couple comments for the DEQ board first, and I want to say thank you for coming out.
one of the concerns I have, and I was at the Air Quality Board, was that DEQ seems to be moving more towards, and I don't mean to be offensive, but more towards a rubber stamp. They do a lot of checklists, and when permit applicants come in, they check the boxes, and then it gets down to the point where they've got all the boxes checked, and they get their permit. So I want to challenge y'all. I want to challenge y'all to look at that process. I know you're looking at it.
Like 2.5, 3 years analyzing all.
I understand that, but the point I'm making here is that the Air Quality Board, and again, you're seeing here tonight with all these people here, there are a lot of people talking about the notice problem. And that problem was very, very apparent to the Air Quality Board, and they were precluded from speaking at it by the procedural shortstops that they had in place. And so when you see this turnout with people saying notice problems, I think you ought to have some sort of revisit on how the notice requirements are met by applicants. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these applicants, because I know when I spoke before the Air Quality Board, I owned up to the fact that I wasn't paying attention, and it got by me. And I will stand up and admit to what Mr. Cody's going to say in a few minutes about the fact that he did tell people. But I wasn't paying attention, and I think that when this many people come in and say, hey, we don't know, there should be some revisiting on how that notice requirements were met. So I want to just point that out to you too.
May I address that real quick? I agree, and I think the Air Board agrees, and I think the agency agrees, and we are making steps that way. I will tell you the next major permit which we had after this, we learned, just to let you know, we are, even though we're bureaucrats, we are capable of learning. A permit action that we currently have going on in the southeastern part of the state. And we, instead of just doing the newspaper and the county, we actually put something on Facebook. We actually did constant contact. We posted something on Twitter. We had an informational briefing beforehand. We reached out to the county. We identified 27 churches in the area. We sent something out to them. So we are learning. We are trying to make sure that what happened does not happen again in the future.
And I think our board and our administrators are working toward that as well now. I think we identified the shortfall and we're rectifying it. But my question is, and this is really, I guess, for Mr. Freeman, Mr. Lloyd, and the board here, I've heard a lot of talk about the numbers, and to me, we are giving up some resources. There's a cost to the county here for these types of industries to come in. It's not a dollar cost, it's a cost of resources and lifestyle. And so for us to give that up, it's got to be worth it. And I want to know what that number is. I mean, we've talked about it, and I think that Mr. Freeman just touched on it a little bit. I would really like to know in a real way, not talking about rebates, not talking about offsets, not talking about tax credits, what is the number that's coming to the county? And I'd like to know what that is annually. Actual number net, not gross. And part of that, and this is really, I guess, for the board and the gas companies. If, as Mr. Adams mentioned earlier, there is a beep hole tax, is there any exemptions that y'all have if that were to happen?
So one question, Mr.
As part of that.
Okay.
Analysis is accounting. My part of the equation, my client's part of the equation is what's the investment? And that's what drives the math equation that you essentially heard earlier. And that part we're not responsible for. That's the assessment process. That's what the State Corporation Commission is there to be the subject matter expert. And really, what is the value of this? You don't have to take C4GT's word for it. They're going to come in and independently assess what is the investment, and in a standard way that can be applied to any of these facilities across the state, communicate to the county, these are the revenues that you can expect. And so while the investment hasn't been made, and so as we all know, if you've ever done a renovation to your home, sometimes what you think the construction cost is going to be and what you pay your contractor are two very different numbers. These can change, but we're projecting an investment of close to $1 billion. And based on that, I'll defer to our experts from the State Corporation Commission as to what that will yield in a typical project such as this, again, not being something that we can all bank on, what that would potentially yield to the county.
Mr. Shrek?
Well, just remember, the commission assesses the value, but we don't know what the local tax rate is, okay? So it's like your home. If you got a $70,000 home, the county has an assessed value for that, but you're not taxed $70,000. So that's the numbers that I gave in terms of what the total capital cost of the facility is. Again, 90% is added, some of it's exempt, so that's the total assessed value for local tax purposes, that your local tax commissioner applies the local tax rate, and I don't know what that number is.
Look, try to be responsive to your question. I'm going to be a little bit of an open kimono here. We're probably just like C4GT, the firm that Preston works for. We do our own financial modeling. We have to just make sure everything is going to work to be a success. We coordinated with State Corporation Commission, the individuals that actually are responsible for putting the taxable values in. Spent a great deal of time with them, and what we've currently got modeled, inclusive of the performance agreement with the county. The first year of taxes we expect, this is all subject to confirmation once everything is finalized. The tax revenues to the county are in the range of $7 million in year one. What Mr. Cabot? It's an appreciating value. So the value that Mr. Cota gave you over 20 years, even with that declining balance, it's in the range of $100 million worth of revenue to the county based off of our interpretation of State Corporation Commission assessments and the current tax rate from Charles City County. So that helps you.
And so be reminded that our tax rate is 76 per 100. And so if you're looking at $700 million, you multiply it like so, 0.76 per 100, and you come out with your magic number.
And it is.
But we're looking between, like you said, $7 million, and that's just from the Valco plant. And you just have to know that both of them are close in size and investment of about $1 billion. So you're looking at first year somewhere between, give or take, we're estimating roughly about close to $10 million, $12 million. But we don't know, like you said, when you're building a plant or like you're building a house, you don't know what you're going to run into in the process of construction. Okay. Next we have Stephanie